Our gospel reading this morning is from the book of Luke. Then Jesus said to them, "These are my words that I spoke to you while I was still with you, that everything written about me in the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms must be fulfilled." Then he opened their minds to understand the scriptures, and he said to them, "Thus it is written that the Messiah is to suffer and to rise from the dead on the third day, and that repentance and forgiveness of sins is to be proclaimed in his name to all nations, beginning from Jerusalem. You are witnesses of these things. And see, I am sending upon you what my Father promised. So stay here in the city until you have been clothed with power from on high." Then he led them out as far as Bethany, and lifting up his hands, he blessed them. While he was blessing them, he withdrew from them and was carried up into heaven. And they worshipped him and returned to Jerusalem with great joy. And they were continuously in the temple blessing God. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
If you are romantically inclined, and I hope you are, don't you know, you can have no better musical friend than that sultry soul crooner Barry White. In one of his signature songs, he sings, "I'm not going nowhere. I'm staying, baby, I'm staying. You know why? I got staying power. Just when you think it's over, I'll come right back again. I got staying power." Just when we thought it was over, Jesus came right back again. He had staying power. Staying power to cast out demons when no one else would even touch them. Staying power to leave the comfort of his home base in Galilee to go to that hotbed of conflict in Jerusalem. Staying power to address the powers in the temple and in the palace in Jerusalem. Staying power to hold up under the whip and the nails and to forgive his enemies from the cross. He had staying power through it all because he had the power from on high that filled his heart with love to face the hate, with peace to face the violence, and with strength to face the pain. Jesus had staying power all the way to the grave. But now that God has raised him from the dead, he's not staying. He says he's leaving. He says he's going to be with his Father in heaven. He's leaving them. Well, only sort of. Right? At the end of the Gospel of Luke, Jesus tells his disciples, "These are my words that I spoke to you while I was with you." And they must have been saying, "What do you mean? You're still with us. Where are you going? Stay right here with us. As long as you're here, we're okay. Why would you be leaving us now?" Today is Ascension Sunday in Christian churches. Ascension Day was actually Thursday, 40 days after Easter, after Jesus rose from the dead. He ascended into heaven. The disciples didn't know where Jesus was going. But he said he had to go to his Father, which meant that he would leave this visible earthly plane of existence and go to that invisible world where God the Father lives and reigns even now over all of reality. As long as Jesus was here, he possessed the power from on high himself. By leaving them, however, He made it possible for that power that was localized in him to be globalized in us. He became the portal of power for the church because the church would need the power of the Holy Spirit that Jesus had, that gave him staying power against all the forces that would come against his mission. If we are going to take the good news of God's redemptive love to all people, we're going to need staying power. The power to stay in there, to stand up to all the pressure that we would otherwise fold to. We would give in to fear if it weren't for this. We would act to save ourselves every time instead of giving ourselves away for the sake of the world. During the Great Depression, there was a run on the banks. People were lined up for blocks trying to take their money out of the banks because this was before such a thing existed as the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation that guarantees now the safety of your money in the banks up to a certain limit. Well, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was president and was inaugurated in January of 1933, you'll recall his famous line about how he believed that the only thing we had to fear was fear itself. But it didn't turn the tide just with his words. A few weeks later, he took an extraordinary action of closing all the banks for a week because everyone needed time to cool down and to think. And then he delivered his first of many fireside chats over the radio in which he called out the hoarders and said he appealed to their patriotic duty and to their neighborliness. And he called on them to put their money back in the banks and to believe in their country and the people next door. And when the banks reopened, the lines were down the block again, this time to put the money back into the banks. And right after that weekend, when the stock market reopened, it had the highest single run-up of prices in the history of the market, and the country turned. Staying power requires first the obedience of patience that allows us to gather ourselves for a bigger purpose than ourselves. That's why Jesus told the disciples to stay in Jerusalem. Now, the word stay, it means sit still. Any of you have trouble with that? Sitting still? I mean, especially when you're anxious and when you're worried and when there's conflict and things aren't going so well. Don't you just want to just run? Don't you want to take off? Don't you want to do something? Sit still. The first thing is to sit still. It's one of the hardest things to do. But no lasting change for good is going to happen until first we receive the power of God for that purpose. The evangelist Charles Finney understood this. He preached during the Second Great Awakening in America in the early 19th century. Finney was preaching to people who were experiencing enormous chaos on the frontier of western New York in an area that had come to be known as the Burnt Over District. Things were changing so fast, people couldn't cope. And Finney knew that any great social change for the better would only come from spiritually changed people first. And so he conducted revivals in which people came and waited on the Lord. Like those disciples who went into the temple and they waited on power from on high by praising God and singing and worshiping until they received that power. So these people went to tent meetings. They went to revivals. And they waited on the power of the Spirit to descend upon them. And when they felt that power, it changed them personally, but not just personally. No great movement of the Holy Spirit is complete when it's only about you. It has to be about all of us. It has to be about society. It has to be about change. And so they went on to create enormous public reforms that cleaned up society, education reforms, prison reforms, the temperance movement, the women's movement, the abolitionist movement, all had their roots in transformational times of waiting on the staying power of the Spirit. So there's a kind of staying power that starts out waiting in order to receive power from on high. And then there's a kind of staying power that stands up to worldly power in order to do good. Staying power begins by sitting still, and it ends by standing up. Physicists, talk about two kinds of energy: potential energy and kinetic energy. Potential energy is stored up energy. It's stationary energy, you might say. It's like the energy that gathers at the top of a dam or a waterfall, right? It's like the energy that charges your iPhone overnight while you're sleeping. Kinetic energy, on the other hand, is energy in motion. It's when the water comes over the fall. It's when you access data on your iPhone. Mothers know something about potential and kinetic energy. 9 months sitting still, so to speak. The gestation period. The building of life within. It's about being patient. It's not just being passive. You're doing everything you can to make space in your body and to nurture and care for that life that is growing invisibly within you, but there's nothing you can do for movement to take place. During that period, you are receiving life. But when the birthing moment happens, the kinetic energy begins to come, and things move out. Life comes to pass in a powerful new way. Potential energy in the church is the stored energy of the Holy Spirit that we receive by waiting upon God. A waiting that isn't passive, because we are putting ourselves in the obedient position of prayer and praise and allowing God to come to us. But when we come to worship and Bible study, we are storing this energy of the Spirit. We come and we stay in order to receive power. And when we leave this place and go into the world, we spend that power. We send out this message of good news to the world. Now, it's worth remembering that being in Jerusalem for the disciples was a dangerous thing, not a safe thing. That's where Jesus was killed. That's where they feared they too would be tracked down and killed by the authorities. But staying power meant for them obediently going into the fray, staying in the midst of that time, and waiting on God for the power to come. Coming to church is not running away. It's running to. Here's a place where we confront our fears with faith. Here's a place where we remember Jesus' promise to be with us wherever we go. Here's a place where we prepare for our mission. But we don't stay here. Faith is a verb more than a noun. It's only passive in order for it to become active. It's a gift that we have to spend. Courage is only seen to be courage when a threat is faced. And so we have to put our heart into challenging the powers of death that threaten all of God's children and rob them of the life that God intends. You've already heard from Jolie Okote today. If her story doesn't move you, I think you need to make an appointment right away with a cardiologist. You may not have a heart. Jolie's faith and work are beautiful examples to us of staying power. Thank you, Jolie. She could have done what most people would have been inclined to do, and that is run to safety. Run away, come stay here in the United States, never put herself in a position to be hurt again. But instead, she went back into the fray, seeking to rescue and protect women and children that were experiencing the same abuse as she. Most of the time, this is how we find our mission in life, you know. We pay attention to our own experience and we determine to be good stewards of what has happened to us so that we can save or help someone else to whom that is happening now. We become witnesses in this way. Jesus said to his disciples after teaching them, he said, "And you are witnesses to these things." And what he meant, of course, was first that they had been eyewitnesses to what had happened to Jesus. But that's not all he meant. He meant that they should be witnesses, that they should bear witness to these things, sometimes speaking and being present as an uncomfortable and inconvenient truth to the world, to teach the world where it has gone wrong, to speak a word of hope. It's worth remembering how Jesus taught them to do this, but that if the world were to have hope, it would be now that Jesus would give the world hope through the disciples, through the church. But it's going to require staying power to stay in there when times get tough. See, the powers of the world that act to rob people of their freedom and dignity at every turn, they are not just going to go away. And thank you for pointing these things out to them when you address them. They're going to resist. They're going to react. The word for witness in the text is martyres in the Greek, and in English we get the word martyr. That's the word for witness. A witness doesn't back down. A witness, even if it is personally costly, stays in there. A witness does the right thing. A witness says the right thing in order to bring about the right thing. We think about mothering today, and I'm grateful, Heather, for your prayer. We're always mindful that on a day like this, when there's so much heartfelt gratitude for mothers and love and joy about those relationships, there's always a shadow side to it, isn't there? We don't want to take anything away from mothers today, but we should remember those who wish to be mothers but aren't. Those who have lost a child due to miscarriage, due to abortion or a stillbirth, those whose children have been taken from them by thieves or thugs or traffickers or by a bitter spouse in a divorce. We think about those children who've been abused in horrendous ways by a parent or a relative, those who have known this kind of suffering and loss. They know this pain themselves. And these are they who can speak and act for good out of experience. They often make wonderful foster parents, by the way, wonderful adoptive parents of children who've been cast aside, or they could be advocates, you can, for more humane systems of caring for and protecting kids. Usually, like Jolie's story, the best way to find your mission in life is to find the pain in your own life. Go there, and it will lead you to relieve the pain of someone else. Become a witness. Stand up for someone who needs an advocate. Don't waste your pain on yourself. Spend it in love for others. The good news is the same staying power that sustained Jesus is available to you and me. You can stay with it Because when you stand up for those who are weak and vulnerable, for those who are shut out or shut in, you have Holy Spirit staying power. Always.